Hello, my fellow Armenians. Podpisаться, Polor Hayrin. Today, I am addressing Armenians for whom English has become their primary language. It's a global community of more than 3 million people. This is not a marginal group. It is a vast, dispersed nation spread across continents, cultures, and political systems. We are united not by geography, but by memory, and increasingly by the risk of losing it. A century ago, we lost our homeland. This did not happen solely because of external violence or historical injustice. As real and devastating as those forces were, it also happened because at a critical moment we were unprepared for the demands of history. Our political judgment failed. Our elites failed. Our capacity to adapt to a brutal modern world proved insufficient. Today, the question before us is not simply one of survival, but of civilizational community. To preserve an Armenian civilization does not mean preserving folklore, symbols, or ritual alone. It means preserving the fundamental structures that made Armenians a distinct people across millennia. A way of thinking, a hierarchy of values, a relationship to knowledge, responsibility, and time. Civilizations do not exist in blood alone. They exist in the architecture of the mind. Each of us carries what can be called hardware: a body, a biology, a genetic inheritance, a haplogroup. But hardware without functioning software is inert. It does not act. It does not create. It does not defend itself. For Armenian biological community to remain meaningful, it must be animated by software, by structured knowledge, internalized meanings, and clearly articulated national ideas. This software is not inherited automatically. It must be learned, maintained, consciously renewed. Across the world today, national meanings are being eroded, not always violently. More often, they are dissolved through simplification, distraction, cultural flattening, and the replacing of depth from the process. Replacement of depth with convenience. Armenian identity is not exempt from this process. Without codification, it's impossible to change the situation. And without codification, without reflection, without intellectual discipline, all our ideas cease to function. They become decorative rather than operational. A people that does not define itself will be defined by others. A civilization that does not explain itself loses the ability to reproduce itself. What we face, therefore, is not merely a political or cultural challenge, but a cognitive one. The preservation of Armenian civilization in the 21st century depends on whether we are capable of restoring coherence between who we are biologically and what we think, believe, and transmit. Identity, especially identity of Armenians, cannot survive on emotion alone. Memory without structure degrades into nostalgia. History without interpretation turns into myth. And myth unexamined is easily manipulated or discarded. This is why, my dear Armenians, the task ahead is intellectual before it is political. We must reconstruct meaning. We must articulate national ideas in a language capable of operating in the modern world, including English, which has become the primary language of millions of Armenians today. The future of our Armenian civilization will not be decided by numbers alone, nor by sentiment. It will be decided by whether our intellectual software is coherent, resilient, and aligned with reality. And that work begins not with institutions, but with mind. We need to feel it, understand it, and then fulfill. The concept of being Armenian exists on several different levels, and confusion arises when these levels are mixed, denied, or selectively emphasized. To speak seriously about Armenian identity, one must first distinguish between its different dimensions. First, there is the Armenian by blood. In this sense, Armenian identity is objective and unescapable. A traitor in war, a person who conceals or denies their origin, or someone who wishes to sever all ties with their ancestry remains Armenian regardless of personal choice or moral position. Biology does not negotiate with ideology. Blood does not respond to opinion. One may reject identity, betray it, or despise it, but rejection does not annul origin. This layer of Armenianhood is not ethical, political, or cultural. It simply is. Second, there is the Armenian by soil, by birthplace. This refers to those born on Armenian land within a historically Armenian geographical space. Here, identity is shaped not by genetics alone, but by early environment, landscape, and formative memory. Soil creates attachment, but it does not guarantee loyalty, awareness, or continuity. Birthplace can assure identity, but it cannot complete it on its own. Third, there is the Armenian by culture. This level is the most complex and the most contested. It includes language, everyday behavior, customs, social reflexes, and patterns of thought. Yet, culture is not static. Some cultural forms are authentically Armenian. Others are borrowed, distorted, or outdated. Some practices, once essential, may no longer serve survival or dignity in the modern world. The central question here is not whether something is traditionally Armenian, but whether it remains meaningful, functional, and civilizationally relevant. Culture without discernment becomes a museum. It's very important, I will stress it. Culture without discernment becomes a museum. Culture without renewal becomes a burden. For us, there is an Armenian by citizenship. This dimension concerns those who live permanently in the Armenian state and participate in its legal, economic, and civic framework. Citizenship creates responsibility, but it does not automatically create national consciousness. A passport defines jurisdiction, not identity. One may hold citizenship without loyalty and loyalty without citizenship. The two intersect, but they are not identical. Finally, there is Armenian as a member of a nation. There is the most demanding and the rarest form of Armenian identity. It implies active participation in the defense and advancement of collective Armenian interests, political, cultural, strategic, and civilizational. This level requires conscious choice, sacrifice, and clarify of priorities. It is precisely here that the deepest contradictions emerge. One can observe Armenians in different countries actively defending the interests of those states, Iran, Georgia, Russia, and others, while presenting this as a form of Armenian patriotism. Many sincerely believe this, and it is difficult to argue with them, because people almost always define identity in ways that are most convenient for their personal position. Yet convenience is not a criterion of national existence. A nation, my dear Armenians, is not sentiment, nor a label, nor a private interpretation. It is a structure of collective interest. When those interests are consistently subordinated, the nation does not disappear biologically, but it dissolves politically and historically. Understanding these distinctions is not an exercise in judgment or accusation. It is an exercise in clarity. Without such clarity, Armenian identity remains fragmented, contradictory, and vulnerable, easily invoked when comfortable, easily abandoned when costly. And a civilization that cannot define the hierarchy of its own identity cannot preserve itself in the long run. This is an important and acute issue that requires not emotional reactions or slogans, but calm and strategic thinking. In recent years, an increasing number of young Armenians in the diaspora, especially in Europe, the United States, and Latin America, has been considering a return to Armenia, not as a tourists or temporary visitors, but as active participants in shaping a new Armenian reality. These are people with education, professional experience, capital, and different understanding of the future. However, the institutional environment of the country does not yet demonstrate a stable readiness to work systematically with this potential. Too often, it remains unused, or it perceived as a source of uncertainty, capable of disturbing established administrative and social balances. Under such conditions, it becomes clear that large-scale repatriation is possible not so much through existing vertical mechanisms, but through parallel and horizontal forms of self-organization. Historically, Armenian civilization has survived and developed precisely in this way, and only in this way, relying on community structures. Միաբանություն and Amkerություն, kind of unions and orders, private initiative and autonomous institutions, rather than exclusively on state frameworks. A realistic path to return involves the creation of independent Armenian diaspora spaces within the country, investment and production clusters in areas such as agricultural technologies, information technologies, energy, architecture, and local manufacturing. Particular attention should be paid to regions where demographic and economic vacuums exist, and where cooperation with local communities can be built directly without complex intermediary chains. At the same time, it is necessary to form an independent infrastructure to support returnees, legal assistance, housing solutions, educational and linguistic environments, private schools, and educational centers oriented toward modern international circulate. Digital cooperative and platforms also play an essential role, allowing people to work globally while being physically present in Armenia, thereby reducing dependence on local limitations. Equally important is the question of collective representation of the interests of those who return. The diaspora possesses significant international resources, political, media, and expert. When used in the form of non-governmental councils, expert structures, and public initiatives, these resources allow for gradual but consistent shaping of a public agenda in which the return of Armenians is perceived not as an individual choice. It's very important. Not the individual choice, but as a long-term national task. A key element of sustainability in this process is the legal and financial autonomy, registration through diaspora organizations, cooperation with international funds, and reliance on the municipal and community level rather than on centralized mechanisms. Today, repatriation is no longer a matter of romance, nostalgia, or symbolic justice. Repatriation is a matter of survival of a people on its own land, without an inflow of individuals capable not only of living, but of creating, managing, defending, and thinking strategically. The country risks losing subjectivity and becoming a peripheral space, existing by inertia and according to external scenarios. I would like to stress external scenarios. In this sense, the diaspora is not an external, I would like to use the right word. The diaspora is not an external supplement, but a critically important part of national organism, national body. Under this condition, my dear Armenians, return does not mean submission or dissolution within the existing environment. No, it means conscious participation in the construction of Armenian modernity. Autonomous, intellectually dense, economically viable, at the same time deeply rooted in its land. Stressing the next, even if state structures are not always prepared to lead this process, history shows that civilizations are preserved and renewed precisely when initiative comes from below, from those who carry meaning, responsibility, and long-term vision. It was my dream to maximally share my ideas with you, my fellow Armenians. I would like to thank you for any subscription. I would like to thank you when you will share this video. Join to my YouTube channel and we will continue. Thank you very much. See you soon.